All right. Well, welcome to our webinar. Today, we're talking about secure orchestration for location-aware edge applications. Location is very, very relevant to edge computing. It is a location-centric uh, uh, space and inherently. So we'll talk through that. And definitely encourage you guys to answer or ask questions throughout. You can pop them into the chat, or there's a Q&A tab. We'll try to answer them in line and save a little bit of time at the end for questions as well. So with me, I've got Dr. Matthias Jost with Flowcate, and Matthias Morath with Liebherr. So Matthias, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jason.
On the Flowcate side, so maybe do kind of a quick intro. We'll talk, of course, about what Flowcate does more deeply. Just tell us about yourself a bit, what you do, and kind of what drives you in the technology world.
Yeah, but my name is Matthias, and I'm active in the location business. I think my complete life, I've been a Boy Scout. Finding things and getting around seems to be in my DNA. I then worked in research space for a couple of years, founded a company for smart city solutions back in 2004, and then in the course of the year, we went more and more indoor spaces because that is where the challenges are these days still. And so I'm quite engaged with all sorts of location-based service. It's my passion, and I run a small software company in this space.
Yep, very cool. And then Matthias, Matthias M.
Matthias M. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm actually Matthias Morath. I work as a PLM innovation expert. PLM stands here for product lifecycle management. So I'm currently my passion is like in smart manufacturing, right? And Liebherr, I don't know if anybody knows Liebherr, but Liebherr's a very big company with over 49,000 employees. We have over 140 companies around the world, 40 production facilities, 13 product segments, like from fridges to mining equipment to harbor cranes and so on. And I think most importantly, we have a turnover from 2021 around 11.639 billion euros. Yeah, my passion actually, I'm an electrical nerd. I'm everything in regards of IoT is something which drives me, right? And I'm curious about new technologies, and that's actually how I met Mr. Jost, about Omlox. And yeah, that's from my side. Thanks.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so I mean, I lead our ecosystems efforts at ZEDEDA, so work on strategic partnerships and do a lot in the industry around how do we drive standards, which we'll talk a little bit about that today. Like you were saying, like I was actually a mechanical engineer by school, and when I was growing up, like if there was a button, I would push it. I mean, I literally pushed my parents' buttons, like by pushing buttons. But yeah, I like building things and creating stuff, and I've gotten more and more into software and solutions. And I think the people part of solutions is really important. Kind of how do you simplify it for people? So. But yeah, so let's dive into it. We really appreciate you guys being here. Okay, so location, they always say, and at least in the real estate world. And like I said in the setup, when you're talking about cloud computing, of course, it's cloud computing scales in density and in very centralized locations. But when you talk about IoT, inherently it's about pulling data from the physical world and then for monitoring and analytics and the like, drive new efficiencies. But in general, when you go out from the cloud to the edge, it becomes very, very location specific because the compute is deployed out in very specific locations. You're dealing with very specific use cases in the physical world, and we'll talk about some of those. So really, really important element. And that's why we thought it made a lot of sense to work together here on this solution. Matthias, I'll hand it off to you. You kind of talk a little bit about, since you're the expert in location-based services, expand a little bit more on this and the types of use cases you see.
Yeah, sure, Jason. So next slide, please. Yeah, generally there are so many use cases where location is important, and it becomes complicated when you're considering location service not only outdoors. We all know GNSS-based solutions, GPS, or in Europe, Galileo or other satellite-based systems. but the challenge becomes imminent when you are dealing with indoor spaces. And of course, we spend most of our time indoors, and most of the economic value is generated indoors. And to have holistic solutions, and usually then you are on the spot, you need a better approach, an open approach. And of course, there are so many use cases where location is important. Using assets efficiently, or identify where assets are, whether it's in production, in smart city, in healthcare, maintenance use cases. Of course, all the logistics, we experience supply chain difficulties these days quite a lot. In safety, and of course, more and more gets automized in order to streamline processes and work or overcome the fact that labor shortages is around. And even more important topic, sustainability. So when things are moved, you want to do this in the most efficient manner, and you want to be aware that does the thing actually needs to be moved, and therefore, a lot of use cases where location is quite important. Next slide.
Yeah, so just to kind of set some context, and then Matthias will talk more about much more detail around location-based services and what they're doing at Flowcate. So the solution that we're working on, and we'll get into more detail towards the end, but ZEDEDA, we offer infrastructure management and orchestration for hardware and applications out in the field. So you can build edge solutions. Any application, any cloud, we're flexible on hardware. You think of it as take the principles of the cloud and the data center and extend them as far out into the field as possible until you just have to go to embedded devices and kind of hard coding. But containers, virtual machines, cloud native, DevOps, again, we'll get into it more. But, as we were saying, edge solutions, very, very location centric. So, working with Flowcate, we're able to deploy their edge engine out onto this edge hardware that then provides location data to those edge applications. Of course, that data can go anywhere and go back to the back end. We're not in the path of customer data. Your data is your data. It goes wherever you want it to go, if not even stay on-prem. We just provide that telemetry and that orchestration capabilities. So more on this as we go, but just some context of what we're talking about today. And also really important to understand from a edge is a continuum, from really, really constrained devices out in the field, like a light bulb, smart light bulb, up to regional data centers. The focus here, there's like kind of IoT or the operations world coming up, and there's the IT world and the cloud principles coming down, and they're meeting at the distributed edge. So this conversation is around use cases deployed out in the physical world, outside of traditional data centers. But how do we leverage those benefits that you get in terms of efficiencies and kind of core infrastructure from the data center, but extend it all the way out to a single box, like out in the field, could be wherever. And then, of course, in this case, drive location-aware applications. So, outside of a traditional data center, but still capable of running, applications on these boxes. So, with that, I'll pass it off back to you and talk about location-based services and get into more detail.
Yeah, and I think the picture should highlight how location, and especially indoor location, is these days being handled. It's a very diverse, fragmented universe with different solutions that are deployed locally and then installed, configured, network configuration, where to run engines to consume location data. So it's a very, very fragmented universe, and we all experience. We enter buildings and we would expect where is the blue dot on the map, and we see it's not happening, or rarely it's happening, and then only for a few devices or for in certain use cases, but not holistically, no matter in which building you are. And therefore, there is a challenge to overcome this, and I think the challenge is on different layers. One is of the operational side, also of the data collection and processing side, and then, of course, in the end, also the applications that use the location data. So, and therefore, that's a challenge, and we jointly work on this challenge in different levels, and we combine our offering in order to make it more fluid and seamless location in different setups. Next. Yeah, and you just mentioned the different devices, and you can locate in various approaches. You can locate absolute or relative next to a thing or close to another box. You can locate indoor spaces geometrically wise, or you can use an infrastructure, for example, a Wi-Fi that is installed and that can localize with a fingerprinting or with a signal strength mobile device, or you can have an AGV that needs to be managed and that has its own LiDAR and its own local map and is moving around. So there are so many different approaches to localize things. And next slide. When we come to the technology side, it becomes even more complex. We have outdoor GNSS, indoor Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, radio frequency identification. A new technology which is popping up is ultra-wideband, which becomes more and more popular due to the fact that Apple has started to integrate this into their latest iPhone products, and now smartphone vendors using this technology as well. We heard, or many of us might heard of 5G. And of course, we can also not only locate things with wireless technologies, but also with cameras, with vision-based systems. And therefore, every technology has its pros and cons, depends on the use case. And often customers are stuck with the decision which technology to choose from which vendor. And therefore, due to these complexities, projects and realizations becomes too expensive, and then they don't happen because the return of invest is hardly to be argued. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the core message is, and you hear from every technology vendor, you hear, my technology is the holy grail. You can do everything with it, whether it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, but actually, to be honest, that is not the fact. There is no holy grail. It's still, or at least it's not invented yet. And so the solution for this problem is to standardize, to harmonize, to have open approach that are interoperable on the infrastructure layer, on the hardware layer, on the software layer, so that things can work seamlessly together, like a Lego brick example, that you can combine different technologies in a most efficient manner. And next slide, please.
I've had I've tracked location-based services for a while, I guess, pun intended, I don't know. But I've had many conversations with folks of, I use Wi-Fi and it's magical. I can solve everything, or it's just beacons. Like, I think it's going to be about the fusion of different technologies. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there is an approach that also is it's coming up. There is a standardization approach that tries to streamline this location gathering and distribution. It's called Omlox. It's an open ecosystem that works on different levels, and that has the approach to harmonize location data with a software element, a locating middleware that consumes location data from the different underlying technologies that you can see here on the example for production side, and then provides this location data to all applications that might need them, could benefit from them in a standardized manner. And I mentioned ultra-wideband, these days still quite proprietary technology. Also here, the standard is harmonizing that ultra-wideband becomes on the hardware side interoperable. This is a new thing that is popping up. It's going around the globe with early adopters, with supporters, and to my belief, that's the approach to follow in order to achieve the real interoperability between locating technologies, software layer, operation layer, so that the data can flow seamlessly, and there is an independence between, or in software would we speak, separation of concerns, so that you as I said, can assemble locating solutions quite easily. Next slide. Yeah, and this approach, would you click a couple of times, two times more, please, Jason? Yeah, the standard has a certain naming schema, and it covers certain areas, and the concept is of also competition and standardization is to find common ground between different software vendors and hardware vendors, so that things can work nicely together, and in order with a belief having standards open up an ecosystem, things becomes much more easier. The adoption rate gets much higher or greater, and the cake becomes bigger. And for every vendor in this ecosystem, then the piece of cake will also become bigger. And instead of fighting everybody for his own, better find common grounds and then play according to the rules that everybody is following to. Next slide.
I always said that we need to collaborate on a common cake, so we have, and then you have your own flavors of icing and sprinkles.
Exactly. That's the idea. The differentiation in the core where you're good at and not doing everything.
Yeah.
Omlogs as such has a couple of features. It transfers local coordinates to global ones. It provides geofencing, vendor independent, and so it has a certain set of functionalities that are often needed for different use cases, and therefore it's an approach that is, as I said, scalable and supporting all different verticals. So whenever you want to know whether a thing is inside or outside a certain area, or you want to have georeference global data to have a seamless flow of tracking across the globe, for example. So in this standard, there are specific features that are needed for many use cases. And next slide, please. This standard is, if you click through until, one more, please. Is driven by a large industry association, and I'm promoting this quite heavily because I'm convinced that standardization is the future, especially in complex situations where we are all in. And the association is called Profibus, known in the field for 30 years and has members around the globe. And there people join forces to find this common ground where everybody can then make his living, build its product, and grow or put the icing on the cake. And that is hosting the standard. And my company is strongly following this Omlog standard. I'm promoting this heavily, and I'm totally convinced that this is the future.
Speaking of,
so we are one player in this ecosystem of companies following Omlogs. We are around in the field for more than 20 years. As I said, I started in smart city solutions, then moved more and more into indoor spaces. And since 4 years, I'm also engaged in this standardization initiative because, as I said, I'm convinced and I believe that this is the future. And therefore, today my company is strongly focusing on providing this locating middleware that can run or should run in edge scenarios in environments that are managed and where we as company don't take care of. We provide the algorithms, the solutions, or the software solutions to deal with locating data. And therefore, it was natural for us to work with ZEDEDA as they provide the basis for our application to run to. Next slide. We are, as I said, our mantra is to use location data to the good of people, to make things better, to use resources more efficient. Might become, because I'm Boy Scout, so you might see the phrase, that's a Boy Scout phrase that is in the DNA of the company. And so we want to help people utilize location data. We want to partner with companies that benefit from location data. That is our mission. And on the next slide, you might see, I think it's the next slide, you see what we are doing. We have showcased a small video where you can see what we do in a more funny or more interactive manner. So
we are in a new age on the path to ultimate digitization. With the rise of Industry 4.0, automation and interconnected devices propel operational efficiencies to new heights. Precise, real-time location data is an essential component for optimizing every step of networked supply chains. Hubert is an IT manager facing one major problem. He must link all locating technologies and applications from various providers to create and control holistic processes for his company. Hubert is frustrated, as he is not able to manage location data in a streamlined manner. The different technologies and solutions are proprietary and lack interoperability. But there is hope. Something is calling to Hubert. The Deep Hub is the premier Omlox middleware powered by the world's first open locating standard. The Deep Hub fuses with Hubert, transforming him into Hubman. For the first time, any location technology from any vendor can be unified through one standardized API. This revolutionary technology enables Hubman to transparently manage all processes across the entire supply chain. It opens the door for an entirely new spectrum of use cases in the framework of real-time tracking. The Deep Hub acts as the centerpiece of Omlox, aggregating and processing location data from any source and providing it to any application. It enables the precise management of geofences, zones, and trackables across different locating technologies. Be like Hubert and harness the full power of location data with the Deep Hub.
Yeah, as you have seen, it's edge. You have seen AGVs. You have seen the warehouse. Our software runs usually close to the where the action is, to have low latency, and therefore it's important to have a runtime environment where you can distribute your software to have then also the management capabilities. And our software is, as seen in the video, aggregating all this location data and then providing it to application. That's the stuff that we are doing, where we are good at. Our software is lightweight, can run on an HEV, can run on even Raspberry Pi. So we are very flexible in the order of magnitude where our software is running. And we enable by location data all sorts of use cases in automation, in logistics, in smart buildings, in hospitals. That's the stuff that we are doing.
Matthias, you got me with a cape. I need a cape now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you take your cape off for the webinar and then you put it back on after? Yeah, that video is awesome. Very cool. So, yep. We'll come back and talk a bit more. So, with this, we'll hand it off to Matthias M. Tell us a little bit about Liebherr and kind of what they've been doing with Flowcate and the like. So.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Matthias. Well, if we go one slide back, just to give some context. Well, I have the pleasure to introduce you today, to Liebherr Mining, and I don't know if anybody of you guys work maybe in Virginia, because in Virginia, or better in Newport News, right? We actually produce one of the biggest mining trucks in the world, which is actually the left side, the product on the left side. And the daughter product or brother product is actually the mining excavator. And this mining excavator is actually produced in Liebherr Mining in Fross. So those two companies work together to provide the perfect fit in the biggest mines in the world. And if you're talking about, to give some context about the Shuffle, for example, the Shuffle, the smallest excavator which we produce in the company in Alsace, which you just see in the next slide. There we produce excavators from bucket size from 7.5 cubic meters up to 47.5 cubic meters. I don't want to mention or compare them with tons, because depending on the material, the tonnage can actually vary. So the goal is actually to have the perfect fit from the shovel to the truck. That those two products work hand in hand and the most efficient way. So as I said, here, the mining excavators, they actually produced here in Liebherr Fross, and in the yellow area, what you can already see here is actually our storage area, because this mining excavator has a lot of parts, and we don't actually produce all the parts at site. So we have a lot of Liebherr daughter companies. For example, we have one division which is called components, and the component division is producing, for example, the hydraulic cylinders, gear drives, steering rings, and such on. And on this side, we are actually putting everything together. right? And then we do like the testing, and before assembling, and of course, like after the testing, we have to store like all the parts like in the outside area. And that's actually the use case where we were looking for, like, to use Omlox. And maybe we see this actually in the next slide. Exactly. So depending on the size of the excavator, we ship everything in wooden boxes on crates, and one of those mining excavators, they actually get packed like up to 25 wooden boxes. They vary in sizes, so it's a very hard task, like to put everything in, and on site we assemble everything again together, right? So between producing or getting like everything together, testing, and make everything ready for shipment, that can last sometimes a couple of months, and therefore we have to store like all the components outside. And in the past, it was a challenge, like of course, like to find all the boxes again in the outside area, right? Because everybody who knows, who runs, like, for example, like some warehousing, we don't have an assigned warehouse spot, like once like the raw material is actually is put together, right? So we have to store like those components somewhere outside, and therefore we actually require like an location service, that we find those boxes outside. So our goal was to have an open standard, and that's actually the case. What Matthias just said, like there are several solutions out there in the field, but our goal is like not to buy in like another closed loop system. So our goal is like to be interoperable, that we can use different location services, and then we not only find our goods in the outside area, we want to have a system which can be expanded like to the inside. And if we are in the inside, then of course, like depending on the technology we use, we want to be open for RFID, Bluetooth beacons, ultra wideband, and the other technologies will come up in the future. And as I said, here with Omlox we found the perfect fit. So if we go to the next slide, maybe. We can see how it actually works. So my goal or my job is every time to provide a proof of concept. So that's the reason why I'm in the Department of Innovation. So the goal is to have a 70% working solution. And then, once like the solution works and, is bulletproof, then I hand it over like to the design and infrastructure team. So the design team makes out of the 70% solution like a 100% solution. And then the infrastructure team takes over and just, provides updates and supplies like the system with security updates. So to make things very simple and not to confuse or to have an interruption like with the local services and local departments, we decided to use, for example, like in the communication from the device up to the Omlox hub, like an LTE solution or like an LTE connection. And we tried, we have to find a solution to very quickly assign to the box like this RFID. So what we use, we did invest in a mobile application, right? And the mobile application runs like on every mobile device you can think of. You assign here on the left side, starting like the auto selection, and then with the auto selection where you actually say, okay, it's the serial number X, it's the excavator Y, and is the box number 1. We have to assign like an RFID to the box. So on a second picture, you see we just open up like the web-enabled camera here, scan in like the RFID code. Or like the barcode, which is represented with the ID code of the RFID. And then once that is actually attached to the box, the forklift picks like those boxes up, reaches and finds the RFID. And once we lose the connection again, which means that we place the box somewhere in the outside area, then we take the GPS position and link it like with the RFID and push it in Omlox hub. And that's what we see totally on the right side. So once it's located in the outside area, then we know where it is, and we find like the information which we did provide on the totally left side, again on the web interface. Okay, so next slide. So the biggest challenges at Liebherr, and it's not only at Liebherr, is actually to fulfill like the customer's orders, and that means like to find the right material in the right time in the right place. That's actually the slogan, what I tell everybody at every site. And the main goal is like to coordinate like everything along the supply chain. And I'm saying that is because I'm not focusing only on one site. I am actually focusing on all the divisions of Liebherr, and I already explained earlier that most of the components coming from different sites. So I'm not looking forward only to have an open solution for one site. I'm looking for like to have a location service for a whole enterprise, right? And since we at the Liebherr IT services, we have to host like all those different systems. It's better like to invest in the future, to have like an open standard, because otherwise we have to maintain like 120 or even more like applications from different vendors on one spot, which actually adds up like in manpower and of course in security risks. So it's better like to invest it one time in the right way and have an open standard, and also invest like in one company which does, for example, like here the IT security when it comes from Omlogs Hub and IoT Edge device, for example, like ZEDEDA. Okay, next slide. So as I said, every company looks for real-time location services. Of course, we have to assign here now the object to an identification, and the identification then like to georeferenced technology. And then on the next slide, what we actually found out, that that's not only us who is looking for such a solution. So a lot of companies have every time the same problem, and that's why we think like Omlogs or like this harmonization in the RTLS environment like is the right approach. Okay. So what are the biggest challenges in our companies or in our divisions? So we have a lot of great engineers, we have a lot of great software guys, but the main challenge here is, if you want to have a perfect fit, you have to find a solution for the hardware, for the connectivity, the middleware, and the use cases. And that's actually where the problem is. So a lot of project engineers, they have the use cases, but they don't know which kind of technology is the best one. So they focus every time on one, but there is not the one for which fits all use cases, right? Depending on the accuracy, the costs are high, and if you shoot like for a low cost solution, of course, then you don't have the accuracy like maybe which you require. Second of all, every device you hook up in the assembly line requires power, and then we also have the problem that once we receive the information, we need an IoT gateway, and then the second part, IT comes in, and they want to have like an overview. So how does this device network? And of course, like we actually we need a plug and play approach, because the systems, they have to be like 24/7 like available. So in case like on the weekend, the engineers or like the network guys, they go on a camping trip and one device fails, like of course like somebody has to change the MAC addresses in local network that they can access it again. So, and then last of these, in the middleware, nobody wants knows like the perfect fit for the middleware. Nobody knows which database to use. Of course, everybody wants the data-centric architecture. Nobody has it in a perfect way. What are the costs? What are the logins, safety concept, trigger events, APIs, interfaces, open platform? Those are all the questions. And what we're trying to find was like how can we overcome this burden? How can we actually assist our colleagues like that we can cross out like those problems? And on the next slide, there we can actually see like what the solution is. So we were looking for like to find a solution which fulfills like hardware, connectivity, and middleware. And a lot of people ask now, so what is like the problem with the use case as well? The use cases, they are actually they have to maintain, or they have to be found like by the divisions or by the site, because everybody knows like as an external software provider or hardware provider, it's very hard like to have an overview of brownfield infrastructure. So my goal is actually to provide here like engineers, the data analytics, the data, and they should not care like how the data comes in, which hardware, which connectivity, which middleware. That's actually our goal, and that's what we were doing in the next step. So it's yeah, first the value proposition, of course. Like, you know, every top management guy wants to know what is the story, like why we're doing this. Well, of course, real-time visibility, you know, the whereabouts and condition worldwide, indoor and outdoor, smart factory, productivity increases due to reduced through times and lower capital commitment, reduction of capital, of course, cybersecurity, you know, one open standard, have one solution which fits it all, you know, do it one time and right, fast implementation, plug and play without impact on existing IT infrastructure. So since we use like the LTE modem, we don't have to, you know, approach the local, you know, IT infrastructure. So it's totally safe. We don't have any like a mix up, right? Which is like the worst thing you can do actually. Of course, the secure investment, you know, if you want to find the perfect approach or the perfect solution for an enterprise, we're not talking about like, you know, small beans. We're talking about like a whole bag of beans, you know, millions of dollars. And of course, like, you know, startups come and go. So our goal is like to have an open standard. And as Matthias Jost already said, like it has to be interoperable. So we can use like an antenna, you know, from one vendor and, for example, like a trackable from another one. So we can mix everything up, and therefore, like, you know, the secure investment is actually given. And last but not least, CO2 emissions. Well, a lot of people, you know, they use like those words right now for greenwashing, but for me, it's one of the most important targets, because we have to change how we work and we have to change how we live, because you know, we only have one planet. Okay, so next slide. And as I said, my goal is to have an logistics 4.0. I don't know if that word already exists, and to be honest, like it's a vision, right? Because I have to get now 44 companies and sites on board. I have to convince them like to invest in an open standard. I have to, you know, insist that, you know, we have to play together, right? And each of those divisions, they like totally independent. That's actually one of our you know, our founder, you know, had the idea like that every company is totally independent, so they can decide what they want to do. They can decide, like, you know, how to invest, right? But when it comes, like, you know, to such technology, you know, there is no single way. You know, we have to work together, and that's actually why I'm investing in this whole technology. And of course, once that information is in, then we can use an enterprise service bus, you know, to, you know, suck like the data out, and we can, you know, use the data like not only for the production, we can use it for logistics, we can use it like for, you know, the sales teams and such on. Good. So what's next? I don't even know. Like, well, the solution. So the funny thing is, like, you know, as an engineer, I have to tell you, like, that solution is so simple. Like, you know, it's actually, you know, people will laugh like how it works, right? We just use like common antennas. You know, those antennas are hooked up like to an IoT gateway. We actually lucky at Liebherr, because we have already all the components. We have an IoT gateway. We have like a facility or like a site which does like control boxes. So the only thing what we actually did, or the only thing what I'm doing, what I love the most, is like just putting like A, B, and C together, and that's what we did. You know, with the correct software, like, you know, and of course the unlocks up. You know, the solution is yeah, it's so simple. It's sometimes I'm embarrassed, like, to tell you guys, like, you know, how simple it is, right? But here's the whole catch, like, you know, the simplicity stops when it comes like to IT security, the onboarding, you know, the firmware. And that's actually on the right side, on the top, like, you know, that's like the most important and the most difficult thing to achieve, right? And that's something we have to work on, because putting IoT devices out in the field, that's an easy task, but, you know, to make them you know, serviceable, right, and to provide like new features in regards of, you know, adding maybe like a connection to the CAN bus of the forklift, right, that requires like that you can do it over the air, and that task is not an easy one. Okay. And that's actually like the perfect handover, like, to you, Jason, again.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, so ZEDEDA, we're all about, you know, helping scale things out, you know, deploying edge solutions, you know, whether it's IoT or, you know, AI or, you know, security, or, you know, a variety of different, really any different use case out in the field. And it always starts with some business need, and clearly, you guys have a business need, around your facility. Rarely up front when POCs are happening, do people think about management and security and all that? I mean, that's you're focused on your application and kind of that first MVP solution. And then often, when you go to production, you realize, oh yeah, it's really hard to do this, in the physical world, like, at scale, and start to kind of scale it out. And so that's where our solution is really focused. We don't do the applications. We provide that flexibility for you to take your choices and deploy it out in the field. And also rooted in open standards. We're big believers in the importance of open. So a nice complement to what Flowcate's doing with Unlocks. So what we offer, our core offer, is our orchestration cloud. So ZEDEDA is a SaaS solution. This is the central management plane where you go in and manage fleets of hardware. Could be gateways, hubs, routers, servers. It's edge hardware. Deploy applications. You manage policies on how data flows throughout your system. The data itself can go to wherever you want it to go. From your edge assets. The data does not come to us. It could stay on-prem. It could go to whatever cloud you'd like. But really, we effectively extend that public cloud experience out into the field. By that I mean, public cloud, the infrastructure abstracts all of the applications from the hardware, the servers, out in these centralized data centers. I sign up, just like you would here with the SaaS. And I just basically, all I care about is virtual CPU, memory, storage, and just start pushing applications. But now it's, instead of in a central data center, it's out, could be on a gateway out, in the their operating environment for these types of location-based services. Could be, again, any use case. But so now I don't have to think about the complexity of the hardware. It's much easier to continuously deploy applications. A very big part of it too is simplicity in terms of how you bootstrap the hardware, how you initially provision it. All of that is automated. And then security is a big component as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Two components to the solution. So ZEDEDA, we sell our cloud orchestrator as a service, subscription based. There's a tenant charge, and then you pay based on edge nodes and capability. EVOS is open source and standard that we're contributing to, again, very similar to Unlocks with Flowcate, in terms of drive an open standard, enable the industry with that standard to prevent lock-in. In this case, EVOS, think of it as it's a bare metal operating system, very, very curated for edge computing. It has an embedded hypervisor in it, so you can run virtual machines as well as containers, Kubernetes clusters, any kind of application format, and a very, very deep security model. Think of EVOS as do for edge computing what Android did for mobile. Create an open standard that you can then kind of scale out an ecosystem of hardware and applications. Our cloud offer has a built-in marketplace to where think of that as like the Google Play Store equivalent of EVOS. And that enables our customers, whether they're OEMs or end users, to build their own custom application stores to deploy these apps. So I'm a field technician. I take a box with EVOS preloaded. I plug it into power and networking, and it bootstraps to our cloud securely. It leverages the root of trust in the hardware to create a digital ID for that box. You can't log in locally anymore. You have to go through the console, because when people can just start installing software locally with USB keys, it's one of the threat vectors from a security standpoint. Remote attestation, measured boot, like a lot of checks in terms of trusting that hardware and any applications running on it. And at that point, you could leave, and everything can be pushed remotely. So here's where you would push down the deep hub engine. All of this could be automated as well. You deep head engine, maybe I'm running some other analytics locally. I want to set up policies. All of that would be done from the central controller, enabled by EVOS. And within Eve, it's an operating system wrapped with open APIs. So we leverage the open APIs that are developed within Project Eve in the Linux Foundation. And what that means is that you're not even locked into ZEDEDA in terms of the cloud. Like, you have that flexibility. Granted, it is not easy to go build your own, cloud, and we're ready to go. And it's, but that provides, that flexibility, so then you can just go focus on your applications, and but also not have to worry about a lock-in element. So that's what we do, very much around the underlying infrastructure plane. There's some shots of our console. You can set by policy where data is flowing, throughout the stack. There's a distributed firewall built into EVOS that's managed by the ZEDEDA cloud, through admin, whatever the admins want. You could say, I want the dpub location data, that engine on that on the edge box. I want that data to only be able to go to this application, or I want this data to only be able to go to that IP address in the cloud. And that's important when you have multiple different people hitting the same edge infrastructure. You have different stakeholders, maybe external service providers dropping applications on this common infrastructure. You need to make sure that data is flowing where you want, and it creates separation of concerns between the different stakeholders. So lots of flexibility in terms of monitoring and management, orchestrating apps, looking at the performance of the hardware, the utilization, all done as a service. And again, very important, we are infrastructure plane, not application plane. So you would deploy and manage your applications in band, as you normally would. The dpub from Flowcate, they have a console to where you set policies for and set up the dpub engine at the edge. That would be in band with dpub engine. We help get the dpub engine out into the field along with any other application. So that's the difference between infrastructure management and application management. And it gives you that complete flexibility, for growing with it long term. Once you start, usually it starts with one solution, and then you start realizing the value thing, and it uncovers new opportunities, and so you can just continuously innovate on this common infrastructure, both with location services and what we do. I mentioned early on, we see edge, kind of the operational world coming up. This of course would be IoT use cases, location-based services, driving new solutions, around that kind of data, cybersecurity, segmenting, layered control networks, all very relevant with our solution, and kind of the joint solution, of course, as well. Because of the distributed firewall in Eve, it's really good, again, for segmenting networks and deploying applications in various layers and making sure that data is going where it's supposed to go, and you've got that separation of concerns. The workload consolidation element, that could be either HMIs, SCADA, historians, protocol translation, location-based services, kind of more on the operational side, or it could be IT apps, AI, databases, different things like that. It could be any combination of workloads, just as you would do in the cloud, but of course now out in the field. We're seeing more and more on the IT side use cases around SD-WAN and private 5G, managing a private 5G compute cell right next to right there in the factory. Anything is fair game, and we just provide that kind of universal base, including the ability to run legacy applications, because there's a lot of Windows out there, for example, in the industrial world, and you can't just drop everything and move to containers. Because we support both VMs and containers, you can also run legacy applications and move more to containerized applications over time. So it provides a lot of flexibility, and including how you evolve your solutions. So coming back to the joint solution, we're providing that underlying foundation, the management and orchestration, easy provisioning. Don't have to have IT skills to go out into the field and deploy these types of boxes, and you can kind of automate the applications that you deploy on top. Really, really robust security. So while we have the principles of kind of the data center and continuous delivery and DevOps and VMs, containers and all that, we enable that. unlike the data center, we assume that someone can walk up and touch that box out in the field, or on the factory floor, or on an oil rig, or wherever it may be. You have to assume someone can physically touch the box. So you have to lock it down very in a new way. Data center, it's locked up in a it could be Fort Knox kind of data center where you need high security clearance to get in. Also, we assume you're deployed on a network that you don't necessarily own. In a data center, you own the network, very, very reliable connection to your controller between the servers and the controller, usually like on a fiber connection, firewall, no problem. But when you're out in the field, you have to assume, it has to work reverse through firewalls. You have to assume you're going to lose connectivity. So just very, very different, considerations. But yeah, so those are kinds of the benefits we bring. And then, Matthias, on the Flowcate side, if you want to kind of summarize, some of the elements that you guys are adding for this sort of joint solution, like foundation for these location-aware applications.
Yeah, it's with the basis of ZEDEDA, we streamline then the integration of location data with based on the Omlog standard, integrate every locating technology that might be in the brownfield already available, legacy applications or legacy locating technologies, and therefore, yeah, it's important to scale out in those environments because nobody would throw out away some locating technology that is in the field, even though there might be new technologies available. So that is the spice that we put in into the source, so that we leverage all locating technologies and then have the basis with ZEDEDA to streamline the data to local applications that run machine learning on the edge device, or supply chain management application, control towers, or warehouse management systems that run in the field or in the cloud, depending on the customer situation, whether it's already cloud-centric application, but in many cases they are also running in edge setups locally. And therefore, yeah, it's important to have the infrastructure, but it is also important to deal with all the different locating technology. And therefore, I think, have quite a winning solution that combines the best of all approaches that are available on the infrastructure side and on the locating side.
Do we actually have any questions from the audience?
There was a comment that Hubman is cool. But yeah, definitely, if you guys, those attending, if you have any questions, as we go, chime in on the chat or Q&A. But yeah, I mean, I would say, just make sure it's clear, like, this is where the edge nodes, gateway, hub, router, server, distributed, that's what's running EVOS, and then we're deploying the RTLS engine on top of that. And then any number of applications can run alongside that. So you might be sending some data to an application, kind of the summary data that's aggregated or fused together and analyzed through the edge engine. That kind of summary of the indoor location, based on the data from all these different technologies. Inherently, when you get into things like BLE, RFID, you need a gateway in that sense to convert that data into IP traffic. That number, that data is crunched. You have the location, results come out. That location data could go, not only to those edge applications on the box, but also, of course, to the back end. It doesn't matter, but it is efficient to that initial sensor fusion and crunching, like right there at the source. And you may also have, say an edge AI app doing computer vision for video, and then that data could be fed in, into the edge engine from a location standpoint. Now, video is one of the best sensors around, cameras or imaging sensors, but I would not want a camera in my, like in the restroom for location. So let's use another technology, So there is a privacy element and stuff. So you really need choice in the various technologies. So other thoughts to add? We'll kind of jump into where we're headed next. But anything else on this?
Not from my end, as I think it's.
Cool. So, just to kind of make sure it's clear, like, very, very similar parallel between what we're doing from an infrastructure standpoint for distributed edge computing, leveraging EVOS, and that's from LF-Edge within the Linux Foundation. That provides vendor neutral governance. So Eve can then become a de facto standard for Edge, an Edge operating system. Very, very much parallel to Omlox, a group of folks with Flowcate, really helping to kind of drive that along with others in the industry, working with Matthias, with Liebherr, on kind of improving it in the real world as part of Profibus, consortium, Profibus, Profinet, and that provides that community for governance and making sure it's vendor neutral. I do see a question, a couple questions. Let me answer. So ZEDEDA, who's our competition? Probably our biggest competition is DIY. Folks trying to kind of hack together these things together. One could maybe look at the data center solutions, whether it's a VMware or SUSE or whatnot, as competitive, but actually they're complementary because it's take those principles and extend them even further out into the field. And then there's folks that do device management for IoT, but we're about applications. We're very differentiated in the sense of kind of splitting the difference between what you would see in a basic device management solution and a data center solution, and kind of fusing that together. And then of course, being rooted in open standards, an important element we believe. So literally, I guess pun intended, where are we headed? In terms of location technologies and just these types of solutions in general. I mean, Matthias, hand it off to you guys.
Yeah, I think the world is dynamic, and it will become even more dynamic. We will have more and more technologies that can locate somehow, or that are progressing to locate even more precise or faster, more energy efficient. So the diversity is growing, and the only way to cope with this diversity is standardization and having common ground, and then leverage the benefits of all the different locating technologies that are popping up and might pop up in the future.
I couldn't say better, actually.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So actually, it's all about harmonizing and standardizing, and providing great and reliable and secure data in regards of RTLS.
Yeah, and we're only scratching the surface on the art of the possible. In these types of solutions, it's inevitable, as you said, new technologies are going to come along. So I think this is why we all kind of mutually believe that it's very, very important to focus on a more consistent, open foundation versus getting locked in. Because when that next new technology comes along, otherwise you're locked in and you have to start from scratch. And so by decoupling yourself from the applications, from the infrastructure, and focusing on standards that can suck in any type of technology, like Omlox, that of course Flowcate commercializes and makes easy to use and deploy and the like. Things are going to continuously evolve. I mean, even location-based services, it's ultimately about balancing privacy and value. People will give up some privacy if they get value, or the risk of IP loss, risk from a safety standpoint if you get value. 15 years ago, if I told you would leave location-based services on your phone on more often than not, you'd be like, no way. Why do you leave it on a lot of times? Because you get value from the mapping and the recommendations and all that. Exactly. It's all about a fine line, but yeah, we're just scratching the surface today. So we do have a couple more minutes for any questions, other questions. Do check out the joint solution brief that we put together with Flowcate. You can get this online if you go to ZEDEDA ecosystem and click on their logo. You can download it. Reach out to any of us online if you have any questions, and you'll get the content and links as well as a registrant. But any final questions or about kind of the technology or what Liebherr is doing and the like? What?
I guess everybody's busy googling the cape.
Yeah. Hubman will be signing autographs after.
Yeah, we have more episodes online of Hubman. So.
So one question what I have, how did he come up with the name Hubert? That's an interesting name. I never heard
Actually, that was our Q&A engineer in Canada. He came up with the name, and we are a
okay.
German company, so he said, Hubert, that's the right name.
Matthias, one last question, like for you, can you maybe explain where the name Omlox comes from? Because that's also like something I have to explain a lot of times, and every time, like, you know, that's there's also like a reason behind that, right?
It's omni-location. It's Latin, so always locating things, and of course, marketeers like to have some abbreviation or a differentiation, and then they just change the C with the X because it looks cooler, and therefore Omlox was born. So that is.
Jason, is also like a story about ZEDEDA, like the name?
ZEDEDA, Saeed, our founder, is Moroccan, and in kind of the language, ZEDEDA means innovative.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's where that comes from. Now, ZEDEDA. A lot of people say ZEDEDA. We say ZEDEDA, but yeah, it always puts you at the end of like the hot companies to watch. You're like, save the best for last. Maybe we should have picked an A name, but yeah, so that's where that came from.
Since I do a lot of open source programming, I like to have every time like a kind of a mascot. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
It's also kind of cool if you write it like an app and you can have a mascot like as an icon, like for example,
Yeah, we're actually working on a mascot for Project Dev within Linux Foundation, because as a open source project, you got the Docker whale and the SUSE lizard and all that. So stay tuned on that front. But so that's time. I really appreciate you guys joining, and this again, the solution brief will go out. Reach out if you have any questions. And kind of stay tuned for the next one. We do have ZEDEDA Transform coming up, so be watching out for that. So that's our annual event, and bring in a bunch of different thought leaders and talk about solution briefs, and I'm sure we'll be talking about the solution as part of that as well. So y'all have a good evening. I know it's later for you, we're there in Europe, and everyone else, good evening, have a good day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
See you.